We have a delectable selection of patches to go through this week, including No Man's Sky with its huge 4.4 update known as Echoes. The Witcher 3 are back with another patch, hopefully that fixes that problem with the ambient sound. Red Dead Redemption has a patch. Oh, and Die After Sunset, if you remember, that had appalling performance and a really unusual stuttering camera bug. If you like this type of content, let me know down below. Stick around. Alright then, have these games been all patched up? Well, let's find out. Okay, we'll start with Red Dead Redemption, I think. This is now up to version 1.0.2, and you might be thinking there weren't any problems with performance. And in terms of visuals, that's definitely the case. It was looking really nice, very crispy indeed, surprisingly so when playing in handheld, and the frame rate was completely locked out at 30 FPS. As far as visuals and performance go, well, I don't think this patch makes a huge amount of difference in that regard, but I'm more inclined to think that it's squashed some bugs, and that's something that was present in the first build. These generally came a little later on, and there were nothing huge, but there were a few glitches within missions, so yeah, I'm most inclined to think that that's what they're targeting here, as I really can't see much in the way of visual differences. That is to say, it still looks really good, especially if you're playing on an OLED screen. Contrast that to something like Die After Sunset then. This is on version 1.0.3 now, and as I mentioned there at the very beginning of the video, when this one came out, it had a ridiculous bug. Like, I'd never seen anything like it. It actually ran at 30 FPS, which should be okay, let's be honest, it's not great for a shooter, but we can take it, we're kind of used to it on Switch. But the camera was so broken, as you moved it around, it just stuttered. It's difficult to describe it, but I should imagine you're seeing it on screen now. So I reached out to P-Cube, who were the publisher, and I said, look, I'm really enjoying this game, but I can't play it. It's making me feel sick. And yeah, we've got a new patch, 1.0.3. And within 5 seconds, look at it. I mean, I'm sure you can see that, right? While it's mildly improved, it looks almost like they've tried to either add motion blur or something so that you don't notice, but the camera still moves in steps of about half an inch. And you can see, again, if I switch to just strafing, the actual frame rate isn't too shabby. It's one of the strangest bugs, honestly, I've ever seen, and it's clearly not that easy to get rid of, and I really don't understand why, because they've got the performance there in most of the areas, and look, I will say that performance is ever so slightly better, but it's pointless even going that far, because that camera bug is, yeah, you gotta fix that camera bug, come on. Once that's done, we can start telling people how good the game is, because it is a good game. And then we've got the two big boys for the week, the No Man's Sky 4.4 and The Witcher. Which to do first? Well, let's go with The Witcher, shall we? Because I've got a lot to say about No Man's Sky. Oh my goodness, have I got a lot to say. Now, The Witcher is still on that next-gen update, 4.0.4, but it now has a B after it. What does that B mean? Well, it means I think that you can hear the bees now when you're out in the open. If I turn off the music in the game and we go to test if the ambient sounds are back in, well, happy days, yeah. It's a little hotfix really, I think, this one. And it really does make a big difference, doesn't it, when you can hear ambient sounds. And it was funny the amount of people that said, I wasn't sure what was missing, but when you mentioned it in that last video, it suddenly really stood out to me. Now, I do want to check frame rates on this one, because in honesty, the performance is worse than it was before, even though it's always been a bit bad when you're in towns, and that's an understatement. As suspected, this doesn't change the performance. It will still go down to 20 FPS when you're in the larger cities, and certainly as I've loaded up my PC save, which is where I've played the majority of the game, some of the areas I'm in there really do chug, but they've fixed that. I did tweet actually to the developer, CD Projekt Red, and just say, hey look, No Man's Sky have just done their FSR 2.0 update. It would be something that would be amazing to be implemented into the Nintendo Switch version of The Witcher 3. Why exactly? Well, we're about to see that with this No Man's Sky update. So No Man's Sky 4.4.0 Echoes has arrived a little later than some wanted on the Nintendo Switch, and if you were wondering if you saw, I put the video, I have to put my hand on my heart and accept my absolute failings, because I created a whole video on the 4.4 update, but it turns out I was actually on 3.8.0 and was comparing to like 3 point something, and in my eagerness, obviously there was some improvements between the two, so I was like, yeah, amazing. And then I hit upload, and then I looked on my Switch and my heart sank as I realized the error of my ways. So there you go. But this is definitely 4.4.0 now, and we do have those massive updates to look at. Now, what I've got to say, it's not all good. There are a few negatives in here, but most of it's good. Firstly, the image quality is drastically improved in most areas. Most notably, you'll see a much sharper line around the outside of almost every object. The ships, the characters, the step-in that you used to see is now almost gone, and it is a stark difference. It's also meant that the overall performance is much improved, as we'll see in a minute, and I have seen some texture improvements. I think mainly they're able to squeeze a little bit more out of the system, believe it or not, and there are big improvements here to things like the photo mode that is employing the FS 2.0, and while there is dynamic resolution scaling here, when you're on planet, things just tend to look better across the board. Now with that said, you will still be able to crush performance. If you find a planet with long grass, a load of large animals walking around, yeah, you can mess it up. But transitions from planet to space and vice versa, the frame pacing is noticeably better. Yes, you do still get the occasional hitch, but honestly, I've been able to hitch it on every system I've played on. I've got around 1,000 hours on PC, and sure, look, that was always my preferred way to play, and the Switch was kind of a convenient way to play. With the 4.4 update, it's much more a case of the Switch is a more viable way of playing, I guess. Now, I mentioned there a few issues that I've had. Well, I've seen a few strange artifacts like vertical lines when boosting through space. Many of the save games have been fixed. That's obviously not a negative, but stability isn't perfect. Now, the photo mode, as I said, is improved, but I have found a surefire way of crashing the game, so don't do this. If you're in photo mode and you zoom out really far away from the character, and then you press the minus button, that will crash my game every single time. I also had a couple of sporadic crashes when leaving stations, so yeah, it's likely that all of the fixes that they saw in the other versions of the game haven't been implemented just yet on Switch, but just for the performance and visual improvements, it's worth it. Now, one area where I think visuals don't quite hold up as well, and it's probably a product of a combination of a lower resolution and then the upscaling, is when you're out in space, ironically enough. The stars just don't look as crisp as they did in the 4.3 update. Or was it 4.8? Well, whichever. They don't look as crisp as they did. There's no two ways about it. Some of them also have a slight strange hue around them, but it's a minor trade-off really for what has made No Man's Sky on Switch much more enjoyable to play for the most part and for most players. It's really, really quite impressive. So that's it for this week. 4 games. Die After Sunset, you still need to fix your camera. Red Dead, man, that game's amazing. And I am so pleased. The overall view of that port has changed in my opinion, with most people being quite happy about it. The Witcher 3, you're looking a bit long in the tooth. I would love if you could get FSR 2.0 as well, that would be great. And No Man's Sky, you guys just keep smashing it. But it would be nice if potentially when you do your next updates, knowing that Nintendo take a little longer to check things over, you kind of delay the mass launch and launch all of them at the same time. But I get it. On Steam, you can just insta-launch and you go for that. So yeah, makes sense. Thanks to all of you that enjoy the content. I hope you enjoy this series. I hope it's of use to you. And stick around. For all things Switch all the time, keep a Switch up. Cheers, guys. See ya!